Welcome back to the Rent Roll Queen podcast. I'm your host, Tarsi Taylor, and today's episode is sponsored by Reebok, the Real Estate Business Owners Conference. Settling on a rent roll transaction can be time-consuming and tricky. Today, I speak with Cate Boleyn from Queensland Rent Roll Brokers all about how you can make a settlement absolutely amazing. Welcome to the show, Cate.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you on the show. Can you please introduce yourself?
So my name's Cate Boleyn. I'm from Queensland Rent Roll Brokers. Been broking for about 12 years now. Yeah, so fair bit of experience in the field and specialise obviously in rent rolls and real estate agencies. So
yeah, and you've grown up in this kind of industry, haven't you?
I have. So it was a family business. My stepfather, it was his business for many years before I came and joined in, and so for the last sort of about 5-6 years, I guess it's been essentially me on my own. He's stepped back and into retirement, so yeah.
It's your baby.
It is now, yes.
It is. Oh, it's so good. But you have seen a lot in the years that you've been doing this. Yeah. You have seen so many things go great and so many things go bad. So today we're talking about settlements and what settlements look like and what a great one looks like and what a bad one looks like.
Yeah.
So can you give us a little rundown of what you believe like a great settlement is and what it is?
Yeah, so a great settlement obviously are the ones that go off without a hitch, and you know, there's a lot that goes on prior to settlement that will allow that to happen. Bad settlements obviously are the ones where it's settlement day and it doesn't settle. Yeah. So I guess with a good settlement, I think the best thing is if you have to have a good solicitor.
Yes.
You really have to invest in having a good solicitor on your side from the beginning. And we do find, you know, if people are trying to save costs on their solicitors, you know, just using someone who isn't a specialist in rent rolls, just using a conveyancer who, you know, might be very good at what they do, but if they're not aware of all of the moving parts of a rent roll transaction, then the ball can get dropped.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because rent rolls transact so differently to a property sale or any other, well, most businesses. So, you know, you've got to take into consideration all the due diligence work that goes in behind it, and then you've got finance, and then you've got retention periods, restraint of trades. Yeah.
Because you know, I've had solicitors say to me in the past, you know, we're speaking about clients, you know, if they try to save money on not using a, you know, sort of rent roll specific solicitor, even when it comes to the time of retention and processing those claims, if that solicitor doesn't know what they're doing, it's like, well, they can waste money in that part. So it's like if you invest in a solicitor who knows what they're doing, yes, you might have to outlay, but you will save money in those times, like with the retention claims.
Yeah, well, that's right. Well, if they don't know what they're doing, and they don't know what they're doing, and all of a sudden you can't claim on those properties, and it's just terrible. And I've seen contracts, and I'm sure you have, where they haven't used a specialist solicitor, and there's not even enough protection for the buyer or the seller.
That's right. Yeah, or it's too muddy, and then it's just, you know, back and forth with retention claims where they might try to, you know, you can't sort of get agreement because no one can actually say what the contract means in those regards. Yeah. So, you know, so you'll get different readings. And so unless it's concrete from the beginning and everybody knows, well, this is what they all mean. And of course, if it's going back and forth, that's when people incur costs.
They do, yeah, especially if you've got a solicitor who's charging by the hour. Yeah. So, you know, well, they do. Like, there's all different types of solicitors that you can deal with, but they also, like, working with a specialist also helps your broker to help you through the transaction and to the settlement process, because if you're not dealing with like somebody that knows what they're doing, it's so difficult for you as a broker too to be able to negotiate that deal.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say one of my biggest things as a broker, if I am recommending solicitors to people, is, you know, if I've worked with those solicitors well in the past, they always keep me abreast of everything that's going on the whole way through. So sometimes you sort of get cut out of the deal a little bit by the solicitors, and I'm a bit of a control freak. It's probably why I'm doing what I do.
Are you a business owner?
So I do like to be aware of everything that's going on,
Yes.
all the way through up until settlement. And there are things that come up along the way. And sometimes if you've got a great solicitor, they'll address those things as they come up. But you still need the broker there to be able to mediate between the two sides. Sometimes the solicitors, even with the best of intentions, they are still looking after their client. Sometimes the way that comes across in the communication can take the other side. They can be a little, it can be a bit confronting. What do they mean by that? And if you've still got the broker there in the middle, they could, well, this is what that means. And, talking even to the other side. Look, I know when I was speaking with them, they're not upset about this. They just want clarity on this. Yeah. Whereas if you're getting some of those communications coming back and forth in the lead up to settlement, some people, can start to diminish that relationship. And you need a good buyer-seller relationship for a successful settlement,
Well, you
a
do,
successful
because
transaction
after they've transacted as well, like it's so important, like the handover period within the settlement for your clients, so your landlords and your tenants, is so important, but it comes down to just like what you said, the buyer and seller relationship.
That's right.
And if they've got that right, and then they can communicate that directly to their clientele, then you actually have a successful transaction. Because another place that I've seen where things go wrong is during the communication period of just prior to settlement to say, hey, I've sold my business.
Yeah.
If they haven't done that correctly by picking up a phone and then sending an email and communicating and basically introducing that new buyer to that client, things can go really pear-shaped pretty quickly there as well.
Yeah, that's right. The landlords never want to feel that they're a commodity that's being bought and sold.
Yes.
So you certainly want that communication to, to show that it's essentially that you're trying to look after them, because it still is a process of, yes, I'm selling my business, but I'm not just leaving you in the lurch.
Yeah.
I do want to find someone that will be suitable for you. So yes, that communication is very important. The sellers are the ones who have that relationship with the landlords.
Yes.
So they need to communicate that to the landlords, because as a mark of respect, really, you've had their business for however many years. You need to be letting them know that you're moving on. And then, of course, the buyer has their part that they need to do to comply with the Act as well. But, definitely, if you're chatting on the phone to a landlord and they are, not sure about, the transfer, you need to be able to get on the phone then to the buyer and say, hey, can you call this landlord? They just want to have a chat with you. And all that's very important to do from the seller's perspective prior to settlement, because if they do choose to go elsewhere, they're not included in the sale.
Yeah. How about like sellers that, you would have experienced this as well, where sellers will literally sell their rent roll and then they're out. That's it. Like they don't want to know about it. They've had enough. They genuinely are burnt out. They're tired and they've literally transacted. They've got their money and all of a sudden there is no communication. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Well, I mean, mostly I think that comes down a lot to how experienced the buyer is. For some buyers, it really doesn't bother them if that landlord is out.
Not the landlord, the
seller. If the seller is out, my apologies. Because, they're from that moment onwards, from settlement onwards, they're building that relationship with those landlords. If all of the data is there that is meant to be transferred at settlement, it's not too much of a big deal. But yeah, if you've got a buyer who's really quite new and was hoping that they could rely on that seller for a little bit of a sort of handover period, or, the contract also does state that they do need to be available throughout the retention period, and it doesn't mean they have to be sitting in the office for 3 months. But, don't jump on your cruise where you've got no reception and while the buyer's still trying to bed down their purchase. So, I mean, we certainly have had ones where, all of a sudden the seller's gone AWOL. But, if that more comes down to the capabilities of the buyer. For a lot of them, they've sort of, they've taken it on board. It's now theirs. They start getting it all into the way that they would run it.
Yeah.
So it's more about that sort of onboarding process and re-educating landlords and tenants and things like that. It's not such a big deal. But if there's legacy issues that they need clarity on, then it certainly is hard if you have a seller that isn't available. But in saying that, that's where transferring staff are often the biggest boon, you know, because then you've got people who do know, they know what's going on with the properties, they know what's going on, you know, with the issues that landlords might have, or ways that they prefer things to be dealt with, you know, tenants who, yes, if there's stories around maintenance, ongoing maintenance issues or things like that, they're aware of it. So,
well, it's also like with the seller providing a list of all the properties, but just basically comments on the properties as well, like, hey, just letting you know this is what's happened with this one, blah blah blah. But we touched on staff, and that's a great point that you just touched on, because some people have this reservation of purchasing a rent roll with the current staff in place because they feel that it's a negative versus a positive. So can you share a little bit on how this works well?
I would never, ever think that that's a negative thing to take
that
stuff
I don't
on.
either. I totally agree with you. I
think I can understand if you might have people who have been working in property management for a very long time who might be stuck in their ways a bit.
Yeah.
And maybe if the buyer, you know, is more sort of forward thinking, or they've got different processes, you know, moving more into more streamlined processes, they may look at, is it going to be difficult for this staff member to be trained in new ways, or are they going to feel comfortable working in these new ways? But I would always suggest at least keep them on for the retention period. You know, they'll have a probation if you're taking them on.
That's right.
But you know, they still will have a wealth of knowledge that is worth transferring, and even if it is for a short period. And if they decide, no, look, I don't want to be here, or you know, the culture's not the right fit for me, then okay, that's up to them and they can move on. And likewise, you know, if they don't work out, you know, the buyer still has the opportunity to terminate their employment and whatnot, but you're still getting the most of, like, if you need to protect that asset that you're purchasing, and one of the best ways you can do that is to ensure that there's minimal disruption for the landlord. So if they're still talking to the same property manager that they've got a relationship with, that they knows their properties and things like that, that's great. Within the office itself, if you've got people there who understand the nuances of these properties, the tenants, the landlords, having that knowledge in the office is fantastic as well. So I could never sort of understand why people would think that it's a negative thing. The only reason would be if they are buying a rent roll because they have current staff who are not at capacity. They might not have the need for the staff. But I think if you have the need for the staff, like, you'd be crazy not to take them on.
I think you nailed it there. You know, even for just the retention period, to know that those properties came across, and then, you know, that person can then transition out, or you might go, oh, actually, no, this really works. I'm going to keep this person. Now I've got the capacity to go and buy another rent roll.
That's right,
I can hire a BDM and I can go out and source new rent rolls and grow my portfolio that way. So there's so many ways of doing it. But with retention, it's so important, you know, if you can get if that staff member is part of that sale, to bring them across for retention, because they do understand, they've already got the relationship. So why would you reinvent the wheel all of a sudden? It's still the onus on the business owner to get to know those clients. And there is a process that a seller should really follow, which is, you know, picking up a phone and having a conversation a buyer after settlement date. Like, pick up the phone, start communicating with them, send them an email, make sure they've got your contact details, because that's really important. You're now building a new relationship. You've literally entered into a marriage with, say, 100 new landlords. You know what I mean? Like, if you actually start looking at it that way, you just go, okay, well, if I started dating someone, what would I do? You start picking up the phone, you start sending your emails, you know,
you
start
bomb.
like, oh my goodness. You know. And then you can, like, back off a little bit when they've actually got to know you, because you know that they've got your contact details.
That relationship started to be grown right from the beginning, and then as you say, and even if you do that, you know, what's the old saying where you under promise and over
deliver,
you know, you can sort of do that in the early days as well. So they are very, impressed with you, obviously. And then, once you get to the end of that retention period, if that relationship is being established and is already established, well, they are less likely to go somewhere else. Even when people are buying, on a walk-in, walk-out basis, and we do see it where you'll have people that have come into a business and first thing they'll do is overhaul, they'll get rid of some of the start, they'll start to streamline things and whatnot. And we do see that is often very detrimental. So even if you're doing a walk-in, walk-out sale, go into that business and sit and watch it run for 12 months before you make any change. And then at that point you can realise, okay, well, that person there, on paper, I didn't think that they were worth what they're being paid. But now that I see what they're actually doing, they are definitely worth that. And they're imperative to this team. We need to keep that person on. Or working out, where you could save.
I like what you said about the systems, because a lot of business owners take over a portfolio or a business on a walk-in, walk-out basis, and they do overhaul straight away the software that's in the business. That's a lot for your team to take on. So it's all of a sudden they're already on the back foot because they're having to learn a whole new process. Instead of being able to take over that business, get the landlords to fall in love with you and the tenants and your buyers and your sellers and then
the employees.
And then start making those transitions slowly. So like one software at a time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would say, relating that back to just standalone rent rolls that have picked up and moved to another agency, take the staff with it, give it that time to see what's needed, what's not needed, what can we do to make this, better, so to speak. But
you want to have a very successful settlement. And another way of having a very successful settlement, so we've spoken about the solicitors, we've spoken about taking on staff don't make too many changes, have communication with your landlords. But let's talk about preparing this rent roll for actual sale.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people would probably come to you and go, I want to sell my business or I want to sell my rent roll. And you're like, well, are you ready?
Yeah.
And what does that look like to them? Because a lot of people aren't preparing their actual business for sale before putting it on the market. And I can say that because I do due diligence, right? And I see the worst of the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
And it's at no fault of anyone, but there's no preparation. Look, I understand it is, I better take that one back. The onus is on the business owner to make sure that it's all ready for sale.
And they're busy running their business. And it's one of those things that just is always sort of, put in the too hard basket for now, and then the time comes where, well, no, we do really need to sell now. And yes, so there are things that they certainly can do, and it's really just comes down to auditing, which is essentially what your due diligence process is. So just making sure, the biggest thing, obviously, your Form 6s, they have to be
That's
compliant.
here in Queensland, so wherever you are in the world, you are going to have a management agreement, and that has to be executed in a certain way. It has to be filled out in a certain way. It doesn't matter where you are in the world because you all have legislation. And I'm saying that because I have done due diligence over the world. So it's one of those things when you look at it, it's like the process is still the same and people are still getting it wrong by not having fully executed documentation and not actually having all that documentation matched to software and so forth. So, we're talking about Queensland Form 6.
Yeah.
And how many rent rolls have you seen where they still have a PAMD 28, which is our old legislation?
Yeah. I've sold businesses that have been around for many, many years. And they've had agreements that even predate the Property Agents and Motor Dealers Act. Where there really was no agreement. It's just, so,
I've still seen the ones where they literally have done the handshake, and that's because that's how old the business is.
Exactly.
But our legislation keeps changing, and that's not just here in Queensland, that's throughout the world. Your legislation keeps changing. I know, the UK's just gone through some more changes. So it's like, okay, and we're still going through changes. So it's one of those things where how often are you updating your forms? How often are we checking them? Are they fully executed? Because a lot of them don't have signatures on them properly.
That's right. And, that's a really good point about how often are you updating your forms, because, for some of those very old businesses or the ones that do have those management agreements predating the new act, Have they increased their fees at all in that time? The answer is no, because they're still on that original form. So you do, even with running your business, you do need to be assessing, and what is, once upon a time, 5% that was standard. That's what people were charging. But we've moved on from that. 7% is a minimum of what we like to see these days. But people are moving beyond that even. So if you want to keep up to date even with what people are charging in your market, you do need to be assessing, your fee structure. And then you need to be going, well, we need to update our forms in line with, because we need to charge more.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of people still don't actually know their own numbers.
Yeah. No, it's so true. And I mean, they can, get it all out of their system, but, send it through to you. But yeah, you're right. Are they aware of that just because they know that about their business?
Yeah.
Not often. It's not until they're asked those things that they go, oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, I do need to know that.
Is there anything that you would love a seller to know before they even pick up the phone to have a conversation with you?
Not really, because I love having those conversations with people.
I'll walk you through it. It's fine.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I mean, it is the sort of thing where, obviously they can be very prepared, and a prepared seller, that's great, because it does just mean that the process can hopefully be shorter for them if they are more prepared. But the thing I would say that I would love them to know is, if you're thinking about it and you want to do it in 12 months' time, make the call now.
Yes.
So never sort of think, I want to sell in 12 months, I'll make the call in 12 months. Phone the broker right at the beginning and just have that conversation. What can I do to make sure?
Yeah.
Let's have a quick look. Let's even do an appraisal for you right now, and we can have a look at that and say, and it could be things like, you've got these outlying properties. Do you want to try to get rid of those? It'll just help us in the long run. Bring up these commission rates. You've got sort of time to be able to do that, things like that, so that we can make it so it is more desirable. And then when we go to the market, we've got a much more desirable, saleable rent roll.
And it goes quicker rather than sitting there on the market for a really long time.
Because it's not, because it comes down to your market conditions. Like, there are times where people will just take whatever they can get. It doesn't come along often, but it does happen.
Yes.
But if we're not in a market like that, it will sit and it will languish, and it will be difficult to sell. And then if, just like property, it gets the thing where people go, there must be something wrong with that one. I've seen that it's been on,
it's been on the market for a little while.
Yeah.
No, definitely. Kate, thank you so much for your insights with regards to the process through settlement and how to prepare better for sale. What I'll do is I'll put all of your details in the caption, and everybody can reach out to you for more details on that.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.